40 for Raidable Crest Titans.
Last time out on the course in the British Cross Country Championship, it was a very muddy start to the season. In North Yorkshire at Pickering, bad weather in the build-up to the event had left the course thick with mud in places, and it was certainly causing the cars and crews to work hard for those results. Aston Cox took an early lead of the event on day one, but a throttle sensor problem would drop him back down the order. He wouldn't be the only one having problems either. Richard Kershaw and Anthony Jackson joining the early retirements list. That left the lead of the event to be fought out between Jason Rowlands, Ian Gregg and Paul Rowlands. But an issue on day two would see Gregg drop down to 17th overall after a maximum, leaving the family battle for victory, eventually ending with Jason Rowlands taking the victory over Dad Paul. Round two of the championship sees the crews head to Wales and into Ceri Forest. A completely different challenge for the crews as they take on the narrow forest tracks, and in a complete contrast to the opening round. Any issues this weekend were more likely to be caused by dust. On to the opening morning of competition then, and it would be the early lead for Aston Cox and Simon Kerfoot. They'd had their issues on round one, preventing them from fighting for the victory, and they weren't going to let that happen this weekend if they could help it. The lead up to the event had even involved a road trip to France to source parts for the gearbox to be repaired. Dedication to the cause and to the course. After two runs, they lead the way by 15 seconds. That lead would be over Richard and Mason Kershaw, another pair having problems on the opening round, but theirs were terminal. They were going well this weekend though, with second place overall, happy to be fighting for that lead once again. One person not happy, though, was former champion Martin Gold, Tom Smith alongside this weekend. They'd unfortunately crash out of the event in what looked like very dramatic fashion, rolling the car a number of times. Despite it looking pretty bad, though, there was minimal damage to the car itself. In fact, once he'd had a little help getting back on the road, he would drive the car back to service to be repaired, and Gold would be back out again soon afterwards for a few runs before calling it a day. A true testament to how well these cars are built and maintained. Third place in the order after run two would be Paul Rowlands and Neil Lloyd. The fight at the top was close. The pair only 3 seconds back from Kershaw, and of course only 18 seconds off the lead overall with that as well. So it was still all to play for going into the afternoon. Fresh from their podium on the opening round, it would be a good start to the event for Rob Bull and Philippa Tennant. Just outside our podium positions at this stage in fourth, and happy with how things were going at this early stage in the event. Recent teething problems, including an issue at the opening round, would now be sorted for Dave and Tony Hooper. All that was left to do was build confidence in the car again. Not an easy task, especially on these challenging courses and under pressure. When it was working, the car was more than capable of chasing a podium finish. We've seen that, and they lie first in Class 10 at this stage. For Ian Gregg and Max Lamech, it would be the lead in Class 4, but they were also looking at the overall results, lying in 6th place on the overall order for now, only 3 seconds back from Hooper up ahead. Ben Cundy and Andy Greeny were out again in the trophy rally. Winners from the opening round, of course. But this weekend, they felt that the course wasn't as suited to the car. Despite that, things were going well for the pair. They end the opening 2 runs with 7th overall and the lead in Class 16. 8th place at this stage will be Carl Duffield, Martin Wellick alongside. They were leading the way in Class 11 with that pace as well. Happy enough with the times, and it was close as well, so a good battle ahead. A few cars separated on the overall leaderboard by just a handful of seconds. Jason Rowlands and Liam Dudley, though, didn't get the start that they came here looking for, especially not after they topped the results at the opening round in Pickering. They'd end the early runs in 9th place overall, almost a minute back from the lead. And rounding out the top 10 would be Andrew Robinson and Tony Jones. The pair had some issues at the opening round, but this weekend seemed to be getting off to a much smoother start. Well, if you don't count the course, that is. Just 2 seconds back from Rowlands up ahead as well. And things had started well for Mike Faulkner and Peter Foy. They were having a clean start to the event, no problems to report. They end the first 2 runs 11th overall, 6th in the class. Let's take a look then at some of the class leaders outside of the top 10 leaderboard overall. It would be the lead in Class 3 for Ed Cobley. The Land Rover driver going well, putting in some strong overall times as well to lie in 13th. Steve Hill and Jim Canterbury were taking a little time to get used to the fast tracks this weekend, but they were going well, leading the way in Class 18 from 16th on the overall standings now. This will be Luke and John Sagar's first time racing at this venue in Ceri, and it's safe to say they were enjoying themselves. And it was showing on the results as well. They end run 2 with the lead in Class 7 and also 18th place on a competitive overall leaderboard, with the times getting better run by run. In Class 12, it was Nick Pritchard and Richard Griffiths out in front, the pair lying in 21st overall at this stage as well. Phil Bayliss and Lance Mervyn, meanwhile, would make a self-confessed slow start to this weekend's event. Some of the drops were causing them to back off a little until they could build up confidence. And understandably so, you might say. They were lying first in Class 9, though, 24th overall, so it wasn't too bad, was it? So the opening 2 runs of the event are complete, and the leaderboard is starting to show some battles emerging. With 3 more runs today, it was still a chance for those crews to turn those battles around and change the face of the competition before day 2. Over the next few runs of day 1, there wouldn't be any change in the lead. Aston Cox and Simon Kerfoot continue to hold that advantage at the top. They weren't running away with it though, far from it. They don't manage to extend the advantage any before the end of the day, but they do just have the edge. And that edge was now over Paul Rowlands and Neil Lloyd. The pair had stepped up a place, picking up their pace and moving into second. The podium place is all still very close, the times showing that nobody was certain of a victory just yet. That move from Rowlands, of course, means that Richard and Mason Kershaw take a tumble, but it's only down to 3rd place overall and just 5 seconds back from the pair up ahead. They'd be looking for a big push to try and retake that on day 2 of the competition. Things were moving in the right direction as well for Ian Gregg and Max Lamech. They continue to lead their class, but also move up the overall standings into 4th overall. The gap to the podium positions, however, was growing. Things were not going to plan for Rob Bull and Philippa Tennant. They were having an issue with the car cutting out, resulting in a lot of lost time and frustration. They dropped right down the order into 17th overall, a far cry from their result on round 1, and they needed some luck and some spanners in service. Ben Cundy and Andy Greeny were bringing those run times down throughout the day. The plan was working. No issues to report either, apart from a precautionary change of tyre when they found a split in the sidewall. Not that it had gone down. They'd caught it before it had, so their Class 16 lead was safe thanks to some meticulous and detailed maintenance. They end the day with 5th overall. Dave and Tony Hooper were more than happy with how their progress was looking. No problems, not having to do anything on the car whatsoever. Their only complaint, indeed, this weekend was that they had to walk the course twice, the good old-fashioned way, because, well, they don't have e-bikes yet. The times were improving run by run for Mike Faulkner and Peter Foy. Another pair pretty happy with how their progress was looking overall. A couple of half spins could have been the difference in their position, but for now, they were in 7th place overall. Jordan Albury and Phil Kerfoot, meanwhile, were finding themselves moving the right way up the results as well. 4 places taken in this loop, in fact. The pair now gain a few places in the class standings as well, lying 4th in Class 8. And at least one of those positions was at the expense of Carl Duffield and Martin Wellock, who would now lose a position. The time's still looking good, though. They were doing what they needed to do in order to stay competitive and in and around the fight in this top 10 overall leaderboard. And rounding out that top 10 will be Jason Rowlands and Liam Dudley, looking increasingly likely that there wouldn't be a repeat of their round 1 victory at this stage, but they would just have to see what they could salvage from this weekend. They now get some sleep and just a bit of a spanner check on the car ahead of day 2. The eagle-eyed among you will notice that there were a couple of notable names missing from that top 10 leaderboard. Andrew Robinson, Tony Jones crashed out, ending down at the bottom of the results. They'd get things sorted and be back out again for day 2, although a good result was out of the question. This weekend was now all about damage limitation. We move on then to a look at the goings-on outside of the top 10, and it will be 11th place overall, second in Class 10 for Richard Watson and Paul Hughes. Around 10 seconds outside that top 10 leaderboard at this stage, still all to play for. A bit of a spin on run 3 would be the only issue that Steve Hill and Jim Canterbury had encountered. They were going well other than that self-inflicted injury, and it would be in the lead of Class 18 that they find themselves at the end of the day, 12th place overall. A nice bit of variety and an exciting soundtrack. We see the return of Gordon Monaghan in his RS200 Group B styled car. It's always a popular sight on the stages, and he ends the day in 13th overall. Ed Cobley continues to lead the way in Class 3, but now a small move down to 14th overall, losing a place in the afternoon runs on day 1. There were no issues to report though for Max and Darren Cook. They were going well in 15th, currently lying second in Class 5, and the plan was working nicely this weekend. For Alan Kirkland and Sean Sabin Farrell, it would be 16th place overall. 12 seconds back from Cook up ahead on the overall standings, but in their class fight it was a different story. 7th place in Class 8 for now. Luke and John Sagar were still going well, no issues to speak of as such. The only problem they were having was an issue with the starter, having to bump start it all day. But that was only going to be an issue if they stalled out on the course. While it was running, everything was going smoothly. They keep hold of their Class 7 lead. Mark Jacks and Mike Nicholson take 3rd place in Class 10 to end the day. They'd lost a minute on run 2 based on their following run times, which could have been the difference in a good few positions on that leaderboard. And Phil Bayliss and Lance Murphy were one of our crews having a bit of a struggle on. This time it was tyre choice. The tyres were just not giving them the grip that they wanted. They were still happy enough though with how things were going, leading the way in Class 9 from 20th overall. A few seconds back on the overall leaderboard would be Andy Skelly and Tom Aubrey, the pair taking 4th in Class 10 at this stage as well. And things were still looking around the same for Nick Pritchard and Richard Griffiths. They end the opening day of competition 22nd on the overall leaderboard, leading the way in Class 12. Martin James hadn't been racing much in recent years, but had decided to enter this weekend as a one-off. No co-driver for day 1, he was having to remember the course on his own, but overall he was pretty happy with his performance and just happy to be back out. 23rd overall for now, with a big grin on his face inside that car. Jesus Navarro and Raquel Dorado would make a good start on the first day, although they were struggling with a wide car on some of these narrow tracks. This car built to FIA spec. It's 2 meters wide, so some of the trees were a little too close for comfort at times. To add to that, they were finding things rough in places, the car bouncing around, but they got through in one piece. 2nd in Class 18, 30th overall to show for their troubles. A little furrowed brow at the end of the day, but everything looking good. A competitive day 1 comes to a close then. Here's how that overall leaderboard is shaping up. All still very close at the top, still all to play for throughout the class leaderboards and those overall standings on day 2. On to day 2 then, we get to see what a difference a day can make. Here's a look at how the results were decided here in Ceri. Those woes would continue for Rob Bull and Philippa Tennant. The car continuing to cut out and getting worse. They're forced to pull over and call it a day. There were also problems now for Ian Gregg and Max Lamech. They crashed the car through one of the narrow sections of trees, dropping right down the order with 2 maximums to end the day. Pictures here courtesy of Jason Morgan. Marvin Refold and Jack Bedford end the event 31st overall. They had a maximum time on run 5, dropping them down the results a few positions. They also take 3rd in Class 18. Things had gone to plan though for Chris Ratter and Kenny Clark. They take the Class 2 victory and have a good weekend. A bit of a 2-wheel moment at the chicane, but they got away with it just fine. A spin on day 2 wouldn't be the ideal start to the day for Jesus Navarro and Raquel Dorado, but that was the last of the problems. They have a good day following that, continuing to take second place in Class 18. That result keeping them second in the championship standings in the trophy rally category as well. Harry Nicol and Emily Sibley, meanwhile, were struggling a little with a lack of power up some of the steeper hills, but they hope to be out with the more powerful car later in the season. For now, they end the event 4th in Class 7, 28th on the overall leaderboard. It would be hard to argue that it hadn't been the best of starts for Toby Jefferson and Neil Hartley. They'd get a maximum on the second run, seeing them way down the order. But after that, things did get a lot better. The times were good. The reliability was seemingly back. They end the event 27th overall. Richard and Owen Green will be back out with a new engine this weekend, having had to replace it after those issues on round 1, you may remember. They do get a puncture on day 1, but that was the only real issue they had to contend with all weekend. The event running pretty smoothly for them. 3rd in Class 7, 26th overall, and that new engine nicely running. Just ahead of them on the overall, and indeed with that, the class leaderboards would be Benjamin and Rachel Clay. They take 2nd in Class 7, 25th on the overall leaderboard. They'd had over a minute's advantage in that position by the finish as well. Things didn't go to plan though for Jordan Albury and Phil Kerfoot. They were going well, but a maximum on the final run of the event would see them drop down the order to take 24th overall. More Group B rally vibes, this time from Phil Ibbotson and Peter King, once again bringing the crowd-pleasing Metro 6R4 out. And they were having a good, consistent run to take 23rd place by the end of the event. Martin James will be joined by regular navigator Charlie Morgan once again for day 2, no longer needing to remember the course by himself. They were still dropping some time though to the front runners, but for a lack of time in the car, they'd be more than happy with their progress and how things had gone overall this weekend. Steve Smith and John Griffiths were another crew to have had a consistent day, and indeed a good weekend all told. They end the event 21st overall, 5th in Class 10. For Charlie Wellborn and Jason Noakes, it will be 2nd in Class 16. The pair setting some good times and improving as the weekend went on as well to end the event with 20th place overall. There were problems on the final run of the event though for Ed Cobley, which sees him drop down the overall results a little, probably around 3 or 4 places all told, but he still ends the event with the class victory, 19th place overall. For Andy Skelly and Tom Aubrey, it will be 4th in Class 10 to end the event this weekend, 18th on the leaderboard. And there's no change to Class 12. Nick Pritchard and Richard Griffiths taking that position in the lead of the class by the finish, as well as 17th overall. Just ahead of them on the overall standings would be Alan Kirkland and Sean Sabin Farrell. They take 6th place in the Class 8 results as well, from 16th overall. Phil Bayliss and Lance Mervyn were delighted. They hadn't had to put a spanner on the car this weekend. It was running perfectly, as it should. They put in some good times and a pace that they were comfortable with on day 2, ending the event with a Class 9 victory and 15th overall. Luke and John Sagar, though, weren't in the same class as Bayliss behind them, but they were enjoying the battle with the pair as they go through the second day of competition, ending the event 1st in Class 7 and wishing that they could have had a few more runs of this fantastic course. One notable crew missing from the overall fight this weekend would be Richard and Mason Kershaw. Throttle issues for the pair would emerge on the first run of day 2, losing them a handful of time and dropping them down the order to an eventual 13th place overall. Max and Darren Cook, though, were counting just 1 puncture as a good event. Apart from that, it was a pretty faultless day and a faultless drive, one that sees them taking 2nd in class, 12th overall. Mark Jacks and Mike Nicholson would gain a bit of time back, ending the final day of competition in 11th overall. And, most importantly, for their championship points tally, taking 3rd in Class 10 as well. Onto a top 10 leaderboard that had been pretty closely fought out this weekend, and it would be Mike Faulkner and Peter Foy rounding out those positions. They were going well, but frustratingly dropped some time with the drive shaft and power steering issues, taking 4th in Class 8 with that top 10 finish. For Richard Watson and Paul Hughes, it will be 9th place overall. That result for the pair also sees them taking 2nd in Class 10. Some good times see Gordon Monaghan climbing the leaderboard, moving up to 8th place on day 2 by the end of the event. A strong result for his first outing in that RS200 styled car. It had been a good weekend too for Carl Duffield and Martin Wellock. They have a good trouble-free run to end the event 7th overall and, most importantly, bagging that Class 11 victory. Steve Hill and Jim Canterbury have a bit of a moment on the fast part of the course, but nothing that they couldn't gather up. They were happy with their result this weekend, perhaps just counting themselves lucky as they take the Class 18 victory, as well as a fantastic 6th place overall. The car, faultless all weekend. Jason Rowlands and Liam Dudley had managed to climb their way back up the order by the end of the event, taking 5th overall, 2nd in Class 8. That result enough to keep them 2nd in the championship hunt after round 2. Dave and Tony Hooper might have made a slow start to the day, but a quick regroup and they were back to setting some top times. They take the Class 10 victory, 4th place overall, and with a non-championship crew ahead, it would mean 3rd place points for the pair this weekend. Not a bad day out. That crew ahead, mixing it with our championship front runners and perhaps wondering if they should have come out for a full campaign, would be Ben Cundy and Andy Greeny. The Trophy Championship crew, of course, taking the top spot in that. And this result means that they lead the way in the British Cross Country Championship trophy after 2 rounds. Not bad for only 21 years old. Despite a valiant effort, there was nothing that Paul Rowlands and Neil Lloyd could do to get to the top step of the results, but they do hold on to the leaders, keeping them close and within their sights. They take 2nd place overall this weekend, winning Class 5, and this result means that they lead the championship after round 2. But all of that, if you've been keeping up, means that with a lead in the event from start to finish, it will be the first British cross-country win in the bag for Aston Cox and Simon Kerfoot. A dream result for the pair, and one that they'd welcome after their problems at the opening round. They do enough here to lie 3rd in the championship standings. So with the event complete, here's a reminder of how those results were decided after the 2nd round of the British Cross Country Championship. Next up, our crews have a short break, returning in July with round 3. We expect that to be as action-packed as ever, and we'll be there to bring you all of the action. Thank you for watching.
Here, 40 for Rateable Crest Titans.